It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Mike Harbour.
Hey, welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. My name is Mike Harbour. I'm excited to be here with my friend, co-host, and author of the Breaking Average book, Paul Gustafson. Hey, Paul, how are you, my friend?
Mike, great to be with you again, and always enjoy connecting with you. And you have been such a mentor to me in my life and a coach, and always enjoy that connection. So, and you know, I'm not the only author of that book, by the way. You're a contributing author as well. So, shout out to you on your support for that book.
Yeah, that's we're going to talk about Breaking Average, the book Breaking Average, a little bit more today than we normally do on the Breaking Average podcast. And yeah, there's 8 authors, contributing authors. Paul's the main author of the book. It's he was the idea generator for that and put most of the content together. But there are 8 other people, or 7 other people besides Paul that had some input in that. We'll talk a little bit more today about that, Paul. But before we do, let's just talk about your idea of breaking average. Where did this idea come from, and why did you feel like it was important enough to put in a book, Paul?
Yeah, appreciate that question, and excited to be able to have this podcast with you. And we have Rick and Diane that normally joins us, and you and I just wanted to have a quick conversation on this topic. But the idea of breaking average is something that's sort of been in my mind for a long time. And I didn't call it breaking average at that point. And I was, as you know, I was on that trip to Malaysia, and I wrote down some ideas here because I think teamwork, I think it really centers on what we can do with others. And this idea of teamwork really stood out for me, like, wow. You know, and there's some good teamwork books out there, but there wasn't one that I thought really kind of brought it together in terms of the impact that we can make with as a unit together. And certainly there's some great stories in the book. We can highlight a couple of those here today if you want, but I just think it's so important for us to understand that you are not intended to go this life alone. You're intended to do this with other people. And this is all about breaking average. The status quo, just being stuck in our comfort zone, that's everyday stuff. I mean, people prefer and choose to be in their comfort zone, but that's not what you're called to do. You know, we just did a podcast on courage. We're called to be courageous, to step forward, go over that line of intentionality, and that's about breaking average.
Yeah, so we're going to dive a little deeper into this, but if you're a listener, a regular listener of the Breaking Average podcast, or maybe a watcher of our show on the Empowered Living Show, what we wanted to do today is just talk to you a little bit about 2021. You're listening to episode 3 in the year 2021, and we want to just kind of lay out where we're going to go to help you, the listener, the leader, the team builder, wherever you are, wherever you call yourself. Maybe you're a coach of helping others break average. This episode is going to kind of lay out the framework for where we're going to go to help you experience more victory in your own life, more victory in your own leadership, more victory in the work that you're doing as well. And so, you know, as Paul said, normally we have Rick and Diane with us, and we're going to continue to have them with us on future episodes as we dive deeper into this book. Paul, you said something that I think is very, very important for our listeners. Together we can do so much more, right? There's a quote, not sure where it comes from, but if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? And yeah. I certainly know Paul and I, just a little history on us. Paul and I met in August of 2011. So it's been, it'll be 10 years this year, Paul. 10 years in August of this year when you and I met on the patio, the poolside of John Maxwell's house. it was at that meeting where we began our own, going far relationship, right?
Yeah.
Paul and I are certainly very different. We think differently. We do things differently. But I know I've gone further in my own life by having a partner in Paul Gustafson, and certainly think and feel he would say the same thing. But we're going to talk to you more about teamwork this year. And Paul, you write something on the back cover of this book. It says, Breaking Average is more than a self-help book. It's a team playbook, a resource to share for anyone who wants to advance as a leader and any team that wants to make a bigger impact. Talk to us a little bit more about that thought and where that comes from.
Yeah, playbooks, think about that, right? So if you're a fan of any kind of sports team, you know that typically a team that executes well has a playbook. And the players need to get to know that playbook. Well, what if we had a playbook in life, right? Certainly the Bible provides a playbook for us. And for me as a person of faith, I leverage that. But what about the playbook that we need to be able to execute on that vision or that dream? How can we do this? What can we have that actually will be useful for every participant that's part of that team, every member of that team? The idea here is, don't think of, like, if you're building an organization, a team, a company, it's easy to kind of fall into the status quo of thinking of them as employees, and that's like I said, status quo. But don't think of them as employees. Think of them as contributors. When you think of them as contributors, then everything changes. Then they see themselves as contributors, which is really important. So if you start with that mindset, then now we've got some plays that we can make together to execute that playbook. So I love this idea of the playbook, and I thought about, like, okay, what are the mechanisms to do this? Henry Ford, I love the quote that Henry Ford gave years ago. He says, coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success. So what can we do so that we really work well together? How can we create that collaboration? There's 7 factors in this thing that we unpacked, right? So you got to have vision, you have to have insight, and insight is really powerful. I can't wait for us to have a discussion later in one of our podcasts on the elements of insight. Collaboration, everybody knows collaboration is important, but what does that really, really mean from the leader standpoint and the contributor standpoint? And how is that all brought together, right? So then we have the trust factor. Well, we know trust is important, but what does it mean to build and cultivate trust? That's really critical. And you could write a whole new book on trust itself. I think trust is one of the key elements there that a lot of people need to build up again. That we lose our change, as Maxwell talks about, trust is like change in your pocket. You either have some or you don't. And when you can't reach into your pocket when you've gone through and made that mistake, there's no change in your pocket, then you're done. Well, we don't want that. We want you to have a high reserve of trust, lots of change in your pocket on that. And then the ownership factor. And Mike, you know something about that because you helped really write that piece, the ownership factor. How important is it to have clear ownership of what's going forward with the strategy? It's not just the leader. Yes, you have to have ownership, but it's also the contributors, the whole team. And then we have to talk about resilience, which builds on sort of the courage thing that we talked about earlier. But what does it really mean to be resilient? That's important. We've got to know how we can endure and get through things like COVID and other crises that happen. And then this element, the 7th element, is the yes factor. The yes factor, I think, is the glue of putting it all together. It's the element of alignment that takes place to make sure everybody is going forward. It's the invitation that you make with other people. I invited you to join me on this as a contributing author. I invited you to help me with this podcast, and you've invited me to do some things too. And through those invitations that we have, and when we say yes, there is history that gets made, right? We get to tell some stories, we get to experience some things, and I think it's really powerful. So those are the 7 factors, and there's elements within each of those factors, and I can't wait. We've only scratched the surface to date. I can't wait to unpack this playbook for everybody on this podcast.
Yeah, Paul, you went through the 7 elements. And for our listeners, if you're watching on the Empowered Living Show, I'm showing a copy of the book, Breaking Average, the 7 Critical Factors to Team Strong Leadership. We want to challenge you to go grab a copy of this book for yourself. BreakingAverageBook.com is where you can get a copy of the book. We're going to take you through this book, the first part of 2021, and we're going to teach you not only the elements that Paul went through, but we're going to teach you how to apply them in your own life. We're going to teach you how to apply them in your leadership. Those of you who are leading teams, maybe you're growing a business, maybe you're an entrepreneur. These 7 factors are critical for you to build this team, this team of strong leadership. Right? That's what it's important. Why it's so important. So many leaders today, Paul. I do a lot of coaching. Right? A lot of coaching. So many leaders are trying to do everything themselves, yet wanting others around them to do more. And so teaching them how to kind of let go of a little bit of that control and build victory. Paul went through the 7 elements. Let me just, have you write those down real quick so that you know what to prepare yourself for 2021. Just write down the acrostic victory, the word victory, VICTORY. Paul went through those a little bit: vision, insight, collaboration, trust, ownership, resilience, and then the yes factor. So over the next few months, Paul, we're going to dive into each one of these individually, take a deep dive, look into them, and then bring some practical tools to our listeners to help them break average in each area of that in their life. And I'm really looking forward to doing that with you and Diane and Rick as we invite them back onto the show as well.
Yeah, it's going to be really powerful because the book obviously offers a lot, but we're going to talk about how you can score yourself across each of those factors. We have a scorecard. We're going to talk about how to do that. Like, how do you score yourself on vision? How do you score yourself on trust and ownership and all those different factors that we talked about? And then how do I transfer that? How do I build up others with each of these things too? So it's going to be really impactful. I cannot wait for that dialogue, and I'm glad Rick and Diane are going to join us on that. And we'll bring in some other experts along the way just to kind of really anchor a key point. And we want to hear from you guys. The most important thing, it's just not us talking to you. We want to hear back. How are these applications? How is this how is this serving you? How is this helping you? How's it guiding you? We love to hear those stories, and what's great, Mike, is that there are some great stories in this book, and maybe we can pull some of those out too in our discussions. But I love the stories that we have, and history is full of stories that represent these things.
Yeah, you did a great job, Paul, of pulling great stories into the book for impact, right? To help us really understand what each of those factors mean and how they were applied in different areas of business, different areas of life, and in sports as well. And then also, if you're listening to this podcast or you're watching our show, know this. We're going to be looking for partners as well, breaking average partners. Maybe you can become a certified trainer or coach in the breaking average way, and we'll have more news, more information about that later. That we don't have that available now. But Paul, talk about that a little bit and kind of what your vision is for having a team of breaking average consultants.
Yeah. So think about this, right? Years ago, I was a varsity soccer coach, and I love that. And I got word just before I arrived to the first practice. I had coached before, so I wasn't like a newbie coach. But for this team that I was coaching, I got word from one of the other players through a parent that said, "Why do we need a coach? We don't need a coach. We know how to play the game." And so I knew that going in, there was this little bit of a hesitancy and a new coach coming in. And so I got a chance to meet these players, and I knew what they were thinking ahead of time. And they didn't know that I knew that. And so I just kind of said, "All right, guys, you're ready to roll, right? You guys know what you're going to do, right? I want to see you guys organize yourself and go do what you got to do." And I gave them 15 minutes, and I just wanted to see what they were going to do. And they started off with a couple, drills and all that, but they didn't really know what they were doing. And so they kind of looked at me like, Coach, what do you want us to do next? I go, and I knew that was the sign, right? They were looking for me. Once they looked for me, and here's the reality, there's more to that story. I'm just unpacking it quickly. The truth of it is that every great team requires a coach. And we want to train folks to be able to help teams, right? Yeah, there's coaches that help individuals, and that's important. That's really important. But what about helping teams? What about helping organizations? What about helping those groups and those agencies and other different elements, tribes, if you will, that are trying to endure and go through something, right? They need a coach. They want to be successful. You know, Napoleon Hill, Mike has this great quote I love. He says, victory is always possible for the person who refuses to stop fighting. Victory. All right. And I love, that's why we use that word, that acrostic, victory. And victory isn't just a one and done. You achieved it. You got the Super Bowl trophy and that's it. No, victory is something that you aspire for every day. Well, we need people to help support that. People need coaches. They need mentors in their life. And we want to help guide folks to be able to have that victory every day. That's why we're doing that.
That's good, Paul. You used the word aspire. One of my favorite books ever to read. I don't know if you've read this book, Paul. It's called Aspire by Kevin Hall. Have you seen that book?
Oh, yeah.
It's one of my favorite books in the world, really. Matter of fact, as soon as we get through recording this, I'm going to go pull it off my shelf and read it again. But he uses the term pathfinder in there, right? And what a pathfinder is someone who kind of shows the way, right? They know the way. And that's what you're talking about here as a coach. It's someone who kind of shows the way. And you don't have to be the expert in everything, but you can show the way and show team members and leaders how to really break average in their life. And that's what Paul is going to do, is create an opportunity for you to be a pathfinder, a breaking average coach as we go forward into this year. Paul, I'm excited about the opportunity to do that with you. I'm excited about the opportunity to dive deep into the Breaking Average book. Here's your tip. Breaking Average listeners, your tip is go buy the book, breakingaveragebook.com. Go buy the book so that you can read along with us, study along with us, make notes, highlight as we teach you principles and practices from the book to help you go and apply in your own business and your life. And then the challenge for you is this: write down the word victory. And then I want you to write down below that word 10 things that you want to experience more victory around in 2021. That's what I want you to do. And then we'll teach you how to use the 7 factors to do just that. And not only in your own life, but those that you teach as well. Paul, you want to add a tip and challenge for our listeners as we wrap up?
Yeah, just to kind of give you something here is to get you excited about, right? Vision is about clarity. If you want greater clarity in your life, then you really want to sharpen up the vision. We're going to be talking about that first, right? So our first rollout is just to kind of unpack that a little bit further. And then, part of this is comprehension. That's the insight. So when we get to insight, we all want greater comprehension. So, as you write down that word victory, and you think about those 10 names that or 10 things you want to have more victory in your life, think about how you want greater clarity, you want greater comprehension. Then think about the others that can help you, that you can collaborate with. What kind of chemistry do you have that exists with that? And then with that are the connections. What are the connections that you need? Because that leads to ownership. And then I would add that courage, which is something we just talked about earlier. Well, that's part of resilience, right? You can be more courageous. And we've already highlighted that a lot, but there's so much more in terms of how we can be more resilient, and we're going to be unpacking that. And then this yes factor, which is really the commitment. What is your commitment? Are you committed this year? We don't do New Year's resolutions here at Breaking Average. New Year's resolutions is average. We do something much greater than that. Right? We pick a key thing that we're going to focus on, and we're going to go hit that. We pick a target that we're going to aim at, and we're going to go hit it. what's going to be your target? What are you aiming for? Now, we do it with a word. Every one of us, in our podcast, we picked a word that gives us focus, right? For me, it's connect, whatever that word is for you. But the truth of it is, I want to have victory every single day. And therefore, we need that commitment. So just a little bit more there. That's kind of a tip and challenge for folks. Ask yourself, do I have the commitment? Again, I'll just run through that. Do I have the clarity? Do I have the comprehension? Do I have the chemistry? Do I have the confidence, which is trust? Do I have the connections? Do I have the courage? And do I have the commitment?
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one last thing, Paul, you brought up is, look, we're still in the beginning of the year of 2020. If you haven't picked a word, we always like to challenge, get rid of resolutions. Don't be average. Most people pick resolutions, and by the end of January, middle part of February, they've already quit on them. But if you have a word to kind of keep you moving forward, Paul's is connection. I think that's a great word. Mine is dominate or be dominant. I want to be a dominant voice in the world for life change, right? For leadership change. Not that I don't want to dominate people. I just want to be a dominant voice in people's minds when they think about leadership and teamwork and communication. So what can I do to be a more dominant, visible face, more dominant, visible, audible voice in the minds of others when I do that? So if you haven't picked your word for this year, make sure you do that. And we'll talk more about that. Maybe the word is victory. Based on what we've shared with you today. Paul, I'm looking forward to 2021 with you. We've got big plans for Breaking Average, the Breaking Average podcast, the Breaking Average book, the Breaking Average team. I'm really looking forward to having Diane and Rick join us in that conversation as well.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. We'll see you.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.